Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for another edition of our Before the Snap series. Today featuring another very, very special guest that I cannot wait to hear more about her job and everything she does for the Minnesota Vikings. But before we get started, if this is your first time watching us, we're just going to explain a little bit about what Before the Snap is. This is a program that we put together here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame to showcase all the different cool and unique jobs in or around the NFL. We know the players, we know the coaches, we know the athletic trainers, and all those jobs that really come to the forefront of your mind when you think about jobs in sports. But we want to dive in a little bit more and learn about one specific job each week. And today we're excited to dive into the world of sales, which I know if you work in sports, this is kind of the path that gets you a foot in the door. So I hope we have a lot of great people tuned in and questions asked today. If you've tuned in before, again, you know what you're in store for. And we thank you so much for watching this program. My name is Jake Ray. I'm the Youth Education and Leadership Manager here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where it's our mission to honor the greatest of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence together. And those values we promote, those are the commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and honesty, all of which made our 371 Hall of Famers the best football players and minds there ever are and ever have been. But it also can make you a great student, can make me a great employee, and can make anybody watching today the best person that they can be. So I'm excited to kind of hear how these values have impacted both us here at the Hall of Fame, as well as our special guest career throughout her time in pro sports. Before we do get started, some thank yous I'd like to pass out. First, I'd like to thank all the professors, educators, administrators, teachers who sent this link out to their students who are tuned in right now, or if you're watching us 6 months down the road and you're just happen to stumble upon this on our YouTube page. Thank you so much for tuning in and giving us a watch. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, everything here for the Pro Football Hall of Fame page. Let us know what you think about the program. And then to those people watching us, all of the students, we want to thank you as well. This program doesn't take place without you. As always, if you've seen this before, you have the opportunity to ask questions today. We always joke, Nathan and I got a bunch of questions we're ready to ask, but nobody wants to hear us ask them. We want to hear you, the students, ask your questions. Students, this is an opportunity to start your networking career, your networking journey. We've had students who watch this program reach back out to us to let us know that because they were able to watch the program and network with our guest, it led to them to getting a job with that organization. So it is a pretty cool thing to see that the program does work, and there are some cool networking things you can do out of this program. So students, make sure if you're in the chat, let us know where you're watching from. We want to see how many different colleges and universities we can have represented today. So give your school a shout out there in the chat. And if you do have a question, go ahead and state your name, the school you go to, and then put your question there in the chat. And we have Nathan watching those roll through, and I'm sure he'll be reminding all of our students to ask those questions as well. So today we are lucky and grateful to be joined by Kawakami, who joined the Minnesota Vikings in 2021. Prior to the Vikings, she spent 5 years at the Minnesota United as the premium seating and hospitality manager. During her tenure there, she helped launch the organization into Major League Soccer, which sounds like it's a pretty big deal, and opened Alliance Field in 2019, leading efforts in building a premium experience, philosophy, and operation, managing 3 clubs, loge boxes, and suites. She started her career in sports in 2011 through the Major League Soccer National Sales Program, working her first job in ticket sales with FC Dallas, and eventually joined the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx in 2014 in premium experience and activation during the renovation and opening of the Mayo Clinic Square practice facility. So we're going to learn a lot about today, how to get your foot in the door, especially in the field of sales. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kara to Before the Snap. Kara, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jake. I'm excited to talk to everybody, share some of my story. And I love how you kind of talk about exposing yourself to different careers and opportunities, because that's what I did when I was in college, and it really helped me understand where I wanted to go with my career. So I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. And I just want to jump aside here real quick, got the YouTube stream pulled up, and we've got a bunch of students. We've already got a Roll Tide from a University of Alabama student. So we are rolling right along here to start the program out today. So students that you're watching, think of those questions and get those submitted here as soon as you can. So Kara, just want to start out like we do with everyday program. You see a job title, you see sales, and everybody thinks, all right, I'm on the phone calling people, selling tickets all day. Can you talk a little bit about what your career is, your job title? Because you just mentioned before we started 10 days ago, you just started a new role within the Vikings organization. So can you tell us what that role is and explain only in your short time in that role some of the things you handle?
Of course. And it's funny you say that. I started selling tickets. And so it was, I started my career on the phone, cold calling and call over the phone. So and 10 days ago, I transitioned over to corporate partnership sales. Very lucky in the fact that here at the Minnesota Vikings, our revenue team is structured all together under one umbrella. So our group manages corporate partnerships, premium sales, as well as ticket sales, service, and operations. And so through my time in premium city in the last 2 years with the Minnesota Vikings, a lot of our premium suite owners are also corporate partners. And we have a lot of kind of synergy between our two groups. And so had the opportunity to transition and focus on more marketing-based partnerships. And that's really what corporate partnerships is at the end of the day. We pride ourselves on being able to get to know our corporate clientele, and then learning about how can we market and how can they leverage our brand and our marks and logos and IP to better their business. So at the core, that is what corporate partnerships is. And I'm drinking from a fire hose, but it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Can you just talk a little bit about, because normally we don't get this opportunity to ask a question like this. What is that transition like? We see people that might move from organization to organization, but you literally have just gone through a job change, a title change, a responsibility change within the last 2 weeks. So what is that transition like? Is there any awkwardness in changing teams or roles, or, how is the organization specifically there with the Vikings, kind of open to people kind of changing job roles and advancing themselves up that quote unquote ladder?
Yeah, I think, again, just the way the Minnesota Vikings approach that, very lucky. It's been very smooth. I think, though, what I hope to do, and you could easily kind of step in and just kind of move forward, but I'm actually trying to take a step back and approach this a little bit like a new job, because of the way in which, I'll be working with my coworkers differently. I want to make that transition for everybody else be very aware and known. So we don't miss a beat, because I think that's my concern, is that, you step into a new role and you don't want to make assumptions about how something operates. And so I put together a 30, 60, and 90-day program just as far as how I want to onboard in partnership with my new manager. And so it's been a really great transition so far. And what that all entails is meeting with different counterparts internally. The corporate partnership area is very much, you learn, you have to be kind of very aware of everything going on in the business. So that you can bring some of those ideas, solutions, let's say from marketing or digital, or even from our HR side. We've had some great conversations about, bringing on partners that'll add value both internally and externally. And so it's meeting with all of those folks and understanding what they have going on in their worlds. And so, that transition, that's been a big piece of my transition, is sitting down with my counterparts across the company and just resetting, if you will.
That's very cool. And I like the idea. One thing you can pull from that there, students, is, obviously your new bosses and people who work over top of you are going to give you those goals. But, Kara took the time to set her own. And that just goes to show that if you put, that work in and you're driven, to set your own goals and reach those points of emphasis, that, it could lead to a smoother transition. Like Kara was talking about. Kara, before we dive into some other stuff here, I want to talk a little bit about what the average day look like. A lot of people think, the NFL, it's 9 to 5, late nights, working the weekends. Obviously, we know that there's a huge amount of work that goes into making sure an NFL game kicks off. That's why we call this Before the Snap. We want to take a look at all that work that goes into that. So can you tell us what a typical work week looks like for you, and then really focus and hone in, what does your game day look like when the Vikings there have a home game?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to answer that question so directly because every day is different. But I will say my days are really driven by what time of year it is as well. So off season for us is really busy. We're selling. And so during our days, during that time, we're working a lot with our current clients, either through renewal conversations, navigating any internal changes we feel like we need to make around our agreements, and then actively selling for the upcoming season. So that's really what off season looks like. My day-to-day right now, it's a little bit of that. We get to start early on some of those things, but it's not as much in the weeds around renewals and selling. supporting some of our development partners with Viking Lakes. And so we're selling some of those assets, but it could be a lot of hosting client meetings still, relationship building, and then having conversations internally, meeting around, what do we have coming up in the game? What activations are we needing to support around a partner? And then still doing a little bit of prospecting and research. So hopefully that kind of gives you some insight into day to day. It totally changes every day though. But by the time we get to game day, we really look at game day as our showtime. We have people in the building that we're looking to talk to. We have activations that are actually coming to life. Think things that are going on outside of our stadium on the plaza. Like we did a really cool event with Buddy Games, where we had a competition with fans. And so some of those things come to life, and we, as employees and staff members, we go out there to support that and help our colleagues put that event on. And then, sometimes we get to watch some football as well.
Always a perk of the job, I think, right?
Oh yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your past there. You mentioned having, it's hard to say what a typical work day looks like and what your game day looks like. How does that compare to the multitude of different experiences you've had working in both soccer, basketball, and football? Does that day to day kind of, alternate like you talked about? Does game days look the same? What are some similarities and differences between your time working in the different sports?
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities, and I think it has to do with just, whatever job function you're doing and the skills that you do day to day. I think those are very consistent in the sports industry. The leagues are super different, and just the nature that each sport kind of has. There's also culture that are, each team and franchise has its own culture. And so I can speak to just my perspective. When I was in MLS, I really, what I enjoyed about my time there, I was really rolling up my sleeves, wearing multiple hats, navigating a lot of change as well. We were sort of in startup mode. And so my day to day was a lot of internal meetings, planning around stadium builds, artwork, like most miscellaneous projects that really wouldn't occur on a normal season to season basis. When I left, it was right during 2020, 2021. So I would say I never really got to experience sort of a normal season at Minnesota United specifically, just because of the nature of what kind of was happening around the world. But I think day to day, very similar experiences, a variety of client meetings, a lot of internal discussions, just to make sure, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes to make sure everything goes off without error on game day. It is a very large scale event. If you look at just the amount of fans and people that you have in the building, and then there's, I would say, different dances happening, especially in premium spaces, which is where I came from. My time in NBA, I really thought the NBA is a really innovative space, very fast paced moving, the amount of games that you have as well. And usually within arena, which, the Target Center where we were, you also have concerts and shows that our clients have access to. So for my specific role, I was very active on both ends of that. And so I just remember that being a really fast paced, interesting time, having also gone through the renovation as well during that time. And then coming to the NFL, I say, like, this has been a really fun way for me to be able to think big. The reach, especially in Minnesota for the Vikings, is bar none. And so you get to really do unique and cool things. One of my favorite memories is taking a client group to London. We had 200 clients on that trip, and just through the lens of the platform the Vikings bring, but also the community that we build within our partner groups, just seeing everybody connect and everybody engage with one another. It's super special and something that's why I do what I do. I love it. And so just to kind of give you a sense, hopefully that gives you an idea of how each of those teams and kind of seasons are different, but
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good insight to some of the similarities and differences. Because, I think if you're a football fan, obviously you want to, jump right into working in the NFL. But, like you said, sometimes there's different job openings and things you need to do before you can get to that, but still do the same type of work you're looking to do, that one thing that you love to do the most. And, while we're going to preach football because we're unapologetically football here at the Hall of Fame, there are some other sports out there that will do a good job in teaching you the job that you want. So what I'm going to do right now, so I'm going to throw it to Nathan Martin. I don't think we have any questions from our students yet, but I know Nathan's got some questions he wants to ask, and I'm fairly confident he's going to encourage the student to submit some questions as well. So Nathan, take it away.
Yeah, Jake, thanks again for sending it over here. Kara, thanks for being a part of the program. And of course, Jake stole the words right out of my mouth. I need to encourage the students. We see all the schools. We know where you're watching from, but we want to hear from you. So go ahead and submit some questions for Kara. Ask her about her career or her experiences, maybe how they can relate to where you're at as a student right now in school. But Kara, I have a question for you, because you mentioned within your new role, kind of having like that 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan for how you kind of want to onboard yourself, even though you're still with the Minnesota Vikings. What is, like, I guess, your dream job or those long-term goals that you have in your career that you haven't reached necessarily yet? Because I know students are oftentimes encouraged to think, hey, where do you want to be from 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Like, where are you at that point in your career? Are you at where you wanted to be? Do you still have long-term goals? So I guess that's kind of just my question for you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I always tell people, like, I'm still renovating my career, at this point. Decade into having graduated and everything else. I do love where I'm at. I think what has been a little bit unique about my story is I've seen different elements of the revenue side of the business. And I think a lot of different of my colleagues have stayed kind of in the track, whether it's tickets or marketing or premium. And I think I've been very lucky to have had opportunities to work both in ticket sales and service, and then also premium seating. And I think that has helped me get to a place where I'm able to step into a corporate partnership role and really do well and hopefully be successful. And so my long-term goal would be, to oversee an entire revenue side of a business. I think revenue is such an important element to any company. You need revenue to survive and to pay your employees and everything else. And so corporate partnerships is a really important element to how, each specifically in sports, each sports team is operating and running. So this is a really great space for me to kind of round out my experience and be able to speak to each of those areas of revenue. So eventually being able to manage a team and lead a team on the revenue side would be my ultimate goal.
I like that goal. That's a big goal. It'd be an exciting position, but it also would offer a lot of fulfillment, I'm sure, in real tangible ways. We're making money, we're not making money. So that's a great goal. I think it's something the students can maybe relate to. We did get a question from a student. This is from Leah from UNC Pembroke. Wanted to know, like, how did you really get into the sports world? Like, we think of those 9-to-5 jobs. We go to school, we got to get a job, we're going to work in business. But like, what was it for you that drew you and allowed you to get into working in sports?
Yeah. It's a long story, but I'll tell you kind of from the beginning. So I grew up in Wisconsin, chose to go to the University of Minnesota. That's where I went to college. My major going in was actually kinesiology. I played soccer, tore my ACL and went through a rehabilitation process. And that really piqued my interest in, being on that side. Mm-hmm. And I went into college and realized, I'm not a huge fan of the sciences. And actually a few of us worked together to start the women's club soccer team at the U. And a friend was like, there's a business side of sports and you can major in it. And so I actually changed my major to sport management. I will say, now I don't think sport management is the only way to get into sports, but it was at the moment for me the best way to kind of expose myself to the industry and learn about the different areas and aspects of the business. And so through that program, they actually ask you to work internship hours. And so, I was really put into really great situations of, interning, and this was all for credit too, not paid. So I had a variety of different roles and responsibilities through those and learned what I didn't like, learned what I liked. And then ultimately there was like a senior seminar class and somebody came in and he was like, I'm with Major League Soccer. And we started this program called the National Sales Center. And, the program itself was to bring in ticket sales and service talent into MLS. And I did the classic thing. I went up to the guy. I was like, hey, I don't really want to work in sales, but I love soccer, big fan, want to work around soccer, which learning obviously now that's not really the best thing to do, but that's how I was introduced. And I ultimately was brought on for the program. And I really found that I loved sales because, for me, I went through the program itself. You go through, improvisation training, and you actually sell campaigns for MLS teams. The program no longer exists because I think it served its purpose. But, for me at the time, it was a huge learning curve just to understand, wow, like what I love doing is actually connecting with people, and I love connecting people to solutions. And that's what sales is at its core. And, I found my own sales style as well, my own voice. It's not always, everyone has a different focus and way in which they sell. And I kind of learned what mine was. And so that ultimately allowed me to get my first role in sports. And I was addicted. I loved the fast-paced environment. I loved how quick the industry changed. Each season, you kind of have a different set of challenges going in. And even though you kind of have a cadence year to year, and then I actually moved back to the Twin Cities after my first job and left the industry for 2 years. Worked a variety of corporate jobs. I found that I really struggled to find my passion. And I was in sales. I was in sort of that same skill set, but for me, I got to really enjoy what I'm talking about and what I'm representing. And I was lucky enough to find a role back in sports with the Timberwolves and Lynx. So I took kind of my corporate experience, my sales experience, my operation and events experience, and molded that into premium seating, which, that was just kind of how my journey unfolded and how I really, left and then came back. Because I think it's definitely hard to look down the line in 5 years and say, like, I'm going to be in sports and this is exactly what I'm going to do. It's okay if, you go a few different ways because it's not linear. Nothing is linear. I went up and down and across. And so where I'm at today, being on the revenue side, really happy. I think this is the perfect place for me. So hopefully that answered the question.
I think it definitely did. There's several things that me just listening that I pulled from it. I think the students can pull from it, just from how you got into the sport management field, the internship experience, learning what you like and don't like. So we always encourage students, like, apply for internships that maybe you're interested in, but also maybe you're not. Like, it's the experience is going to be valuable regardless. I love you're talking about getting into that sales program, and you use the pitch that, hey, I love soccer, but I don't really want to do sales. And what you learned from that, and maybe how that's not the best route to, get your foot in the door, I guess, with that, but it worked out. Leaving sports, getting back into sports. There's so many things I hope the students, can glean from that. And if they got to go back and listen again, rewind and go listen again, because there's a lot of really good stuff there. Next question from our students, though, this is from Michael. Wants to talk a little bit to you about the difference, again, between working with an NBA team versus an NFL team, kind of the similarities for you, and then maybe, I guess, one or two of the primary differences there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I think NBA for me was, like I said, fast paced, very innovative. I think that just the way that the nimbleness of the league itself, they have a really great structure with supporting each franchise. And so I remember just going through the renovation and having, listening to some of our leaders and how they're approaching the renovation changes. And they did a lot of research through their support in the NBA. And it's just, maybe it was the time in which I was a part of the franchise, but we had opened practice facilities. And I think everything that we were doing was on the forefront and cutting edge. And I loved it. And I think, like, when you're on the suite level too, because the arena is inside and it's a little bit smaller than what I would consider, an NFL stadium, there's a level of intimacy and connectiveness that we had with our clients because it was just a little bit smaller. And so I just remember enjoying that dynamic. So I don't have, a ton of other nuggets on that piece, but with the NFL, just grand, large. The reach is incredible. I think I've never been part of a team that has such a wide range fan base as well. And I think that just speaks to what Minnesota is in our environment. We're the state of hockey, but also like it's Vikings land over here. So, I'm really proud to represent and work for the Minnesota Vikings. And I think just the level of fandom and the connectiveness that we have with our community has allowed us to really thrive from a business standpoint as well. And so even going through the last few years, coming out of COVID, we've been lucky enough to have had great success on the business front. Our hospitality, our suites, we are sold out. Just a lot of positive things that have come out from that I've experienced, at least being part of this team. So those are the takeaways that I guess that I have, just as far as my different experience. And I think too, just the history, the NFL just has some incredible history, and so does the Minnesota Vikings team. So that carries through. We have, really strong values about, building a legacy for the Minnesota Vikings. And, that resonates with me coming in and being an employee and part of our brand.
For sure. I mean, I think you did a good job explaining the differences there, but also, I mean, we're not going to apologize. Jake said, we'll tout the game of football and the NFL. So we're excited. I think a lot of the things you said, just with the reach and the historical component. I mean, we're a museum for football history. So yeah. I love hearing that here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You're speaking our language for sure. This is a question from Kyle, and he wants to know, what's one thing that you want other people, these students, to know about the sports industry that you didn't know before you got into it, that you're like, would have been nice to kind of know that the students maybe could learn from?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I feel in my experience is it's about relationships. And relationships come from how you interact with other people, obviously. And when I was talking about kind of my journey getting into the industry, I failed to really talk about how I got in the door. And the reason I did was because every job I had, I did my best, even if I didn't love it the most. And those references and those people that are able to speak on my behalf allowed me to get in the door at other places, because the industry is so small. We actually, at the Minnesota Vikings, we have a great associate program. It's a good example. Talk like 30 different associates that'll come in. These are, recent graduates that are looking to work in sports. And so we hire that group on. They stay for about one season, and they work in various areas of our organization. A lot of times we are able to hire them on if we have open opportunities, but more often than not, they're kind of expanding and going to other areas of the country. That's an example of a network that, an associate class will have, and those are resources. Those are people that are going to, be able, you can call them and ask questions and get best practices from. And that's invaluable, because I think not having perspective when you're in your day-to-day might, that's going to slow you down. You always want to have perspective. You want to always be asking who's doing it better. And you can only answer those questions by calling other people and having relationships elsewhere. And so, yeah, to answer your question, it's relationships. And I think making sure you're doing your best and working in respect and on behalf of others, and making a positive impact that way. So relationships, I think, are key. And also to, what I do day to day with selling and working with clients, those relationships have allowed me to be successful as well.
I know for me, when I was in college, they always talked about it's your network, it's your network, it's your network. And that sounds so, I don't know, like, I don't want to say icky, but like, it's so like professional. And like when you term it as a relationship though, as opposed to a network though, it makes it very personal. And I think hopefully the students can see there's a difference between having a connection with someone on LinkedIn that like you've never talked to, and there's value in that and you can learn something from them. But when you actually have the opportunity to form a relationship with someone you're working for, or other students that might have opportunities for you to maybe work with them in the future, like take advantage of that and really utilize that opportunity and care about those people and make it a true relationship and not just a networking professional relationship. I think that can go a long way. This next question, and then I'm going to send it back to Jake because I want to look through. We're getting all kinds of questions. The students are doing great. If we don't get to your question today, I encourage you to connect with Kara on LinkedIn. I'm sure she would love to answer your questions, or maybe set up, 15 minutes down the road some other time, and you guys could connect and learn more about her career. But this comes from Abby, and this is great for college students because it's related to right out of college. Maybe after that first internship, you're prepping that resume, you're trying to prepare for the interview. What's something maybe you did or some advice that you were given to help you stand out? I mean, in these competitive fields where there might be hundreds, if not thousands of resumes they're looking through, how can their resume stand out? And then once they get the interview, how can they stand out in the interview?
It's hard because I think everybody might be looking for something different depending on what role, but I think, again, it's maybe taking time now that you're in college, reach out to organizations, talk to people that might be in a role. I think those informational interviews are really valuable because not only are you going to understand better if it's a fit for you, but you have a better view into, okay, what does that day-to-day look like? What are the expectations of, somebody that might have this role? And then you're prepared to tailor your resume to that. Then also maybe somebody in that organization because you did an informational interview. I think we always talk about this too. When I was going through college, it was like, it's all about who you know, right? But I flipped that on its head, and it's about who knows you. And so if you have reached out and you've made an impact, I think also important to share a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you care about, what motivates you. And if somebody really knows who you are and speaks positively about you, that's how you can get into the door. I really encourage students to work part-time roles, whether it's game day roles or, football. There's a lot of training camp roles out there that you can tap into during the summer months. That's a really great way to get experience on your resume that shows that you understand and have kind of seen and worked in a space, within the sports industry. And if you haven't, that's okay too. I would say when I'm looking at resumes for like associate roles, it's not just about GPA and major. I more so look at your experience. What do you do? What do you spend your time on? Are you in extracurricular activities? Did you take leadership roles in those curricular activities? And then what kind of job experience have you had? What's great about what I've seen change in the industry is we're hiring less people out of sport management and more people that have skill sets. And so what is your superpower? Are you a really good connector? Because that's for me what my superpower is. I really like to get to know people and then connect them with others. And I think I'm a really good connector. So I tailor that into my day-to-day. And obviously I'm more happy because I'm living my authentic self day to day. If you're into data and science, there are a million now roles out there about, analytics and marketing metrics, things like that. And so, identify what you love doing and what you're best at, and, start putting some, feelers out there for roles that work in that space, if that helps. So
I really like that. I might have to steal that where you said it's not necessarily who you know, but who knows you, because that goes back to the relationship piece. If they know who you are, there's a legitimate relationship there. It's not just like, oh yeah, I connect with that person. That's really good. I think that hopefully the students will take away from this conversation. But for now, I'm going to send it back to Jake for a couple of questions. I'm going to look through some more of these student questions, and then I'm sure we'll come back here for more of those. But Jake, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, I want to touch on some stuff, Kara, looking at your job specifically in the NFL. Obviously with wins comes a lot of good things. With losses come a lot of bad things. In your role specifically, looking at the team you work for, is it easier to sell when the Vikings are winning like they were last year? And is it harder to sell looking at their record this year? How do the 2 years compare? And what is your process like when you're in those scenarios? Or is it, hey, you know what? I have a job to do, and I'm going to do that no matter what the success on the field looks like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we will all, if we work in sports, I think it's possible, there's seasons that aren't the most storybook. And yeah, last year for the Vikings was a fun season. We had such a good time. When you're losing, obviously the hot dogs are colder, the beer's warmer. There's more things that can be brought up, but hopefully if we are doing our job, especially on the revenue side and with our relationships and our stakeholders, we're trying to add value beyond wins and losses. It's about, for hospitality, it was about creating a really memorable experience, creating a really strong platform for our clients to entertain their guests. That was important. And a lot of times we weren't facing the field, we're facing our clients and entertaining them. And same with, corporate partnerships. I think adding value, they're coming to us for marketing solutions. And, that is at the key. If we're doing our roles there and we're executing and activating well, they're finding success because our brand is beyond wins and losses. It's a community of fans that care about this team. It's bigger than all of us. And that's exactly why we work and love sports, because of those things. And so, there are days that are a little tough. We get sad and down. We have a tough game, but we try to kind of future-proof our business and what we do with our stakeholders beyond those wins and losses.
And now, back to the personal side of your job, we talked a lot about networking, getting the most experiences you can going into a career. But once you get into that job, there are still opportunities to network with other people and get together and work with people that you normally wouldn't work to on a day-to-day basis. So one thing we want to ask you about is, you work with the WISE, Women in Sports and Events, Twin Cities chapter up there in Minnesota. Can you tell us a little bit about what that organization is about and some of the things you handle, and why is it important to kind of step outside your day-to-day role and interact with in your case, other women in sports who work in the same area you do?
Yeah, that's great. WISE stands for Women in Sports and Events. It's a national organization. There are 25 national chapters, more trying to be started as well. And so the Twin Cities chapter started in 2018, and I was lucky enough to be part of that original board of directors. My role with the board at the time was managing events and programming, which was a very intimidating thing for me. And I chose to say yes to that because at the time I was actually with United, and it was a way for me to really challenge myself to do something different. And I found value connecting with coworkers and people outside of my universe, and that has tenfold helped me with my career. It has given me perspective. I have people to lean on, and also, I've worked and honed in on a skill set that maybe in a day-to-day setting I wouldn't be working on. And at the time, it was events and programming. Currently with WISE, I serve as the chapter president, and so one day I really want to lead a team, and we talked about that earlier. And so with our chapter locally, I get the privilege of working closely with 25 volunteers that are on our board and operating. We're a working board, and so every event, program, marketing, social media post, that's all being pushed through by our volunteers. And so, I get, this is for me a space that I can be a better professional. And obviously when you work with people on a project like this, you just build more relationships, and it's really, really rewarding. I think too, even talking about when these other opportunities come up outside of your role, even at the Minnesota Vikings, there's so many ways in which you can volunteer and give your time back. One of those for me is the DE&I Council, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as we are launching employee resource groups at the Vikings as well. So there's a few of us that are working on some of those projects. And again, I get to really spend time and work with people that I don't cross paths with on a day-to-day basis. And so, those relationships are helpful. They give me perspective, like I said. And, I'm really grateful to be able to be afforded the time and, the opportunity to help in different areas. So I definitely encourage people to reach across the aisle, so to speak. And when you can, get involved in outside of your role.
Very cool. I want to talk a little bit about the perks that come with working in sports. Obviously, there are perks that come with every job, but in sports, those tend to be a little bit cooler. And maybe that's just because I worked in sports my entire life, and you as well. But, looking at your career, I always like to joke, your career's over, you're lean back in the lazy boy, and your grandkids ask you, what was your favorite moment in sports? So up to the point right now, if you can look back on your career, it doesn't have to be with the Vikings, but anytime, anything you've been involved with in sports, what's that moment that stands out where you go, wow, I can't believe I was a part of this? What would that moment be for you?
Gosh, actually, it is with the Vikings. I think when we flew to London, we had our private plane chartered with all of our clientele together, and it was just such a special trip. And I was sitting there like pinching myself. I'm like, I can't believe I'm flying to London for my job. And we had a variety of events and experiences that we did together over in London. And one of the things too that I loved was my husband actually flew over separately, and we ended up being able to spend some time together too. So it was just a really cool bring together. And I was able to do some sightseeing as well. But that's a really cool opportunity. I mean, we were there working, right? Like, I'm not saying like we weren't working, but to be able to work and be in London and entertain and connect with our clients, like that's a huge privilege. And that working in sports for me, that's why I do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We've said unapologetically football here a few times today, and we know what the power of football can bring. So from your experience with the Vikings, how have you seen the game of football impact those who watch it, play it, coach it, are fans of it, are, those sponsors and those people who are sitting in those suites and loges you got to oversee? What are those values that those people bring away from the game and then be able to apply to their life outside of being a fan or playing the game?
Yeah, I think that the top thing for me is really just sports build bridges and they form community. And that's what the Vikings have here. And that's what I love the most. You're kind of a part of something bigger than yourself, and you're contributing to something bigger than yourself. And that's why I work in sports, and that's why I love it so much. I think too, like just as a professional, what I feel like some of the values we have, grit and resilience, just being able to be disciplined and eliminate distractions and learn from challenges. I think that's key. And what I feel football also talks about, obviously team first, right? Like we all work together on the same common goal. And, even with our partners, we're not sitting across from each other, working hand in hand to make an agreement successful. So, and then, I think too, like the platform that football brings is so massive, and being very protective and aware of that is something that I try not to forget. And so when we have the opportunity to form partnerships, for instance, or sign a client, making sure that our values align and that we believe in what we're putting out there in the world as well. So I think that's really meaningful and special about being a part of the football universe.
Awesome. All right. Well, I know we got some more questions to get to before we wrap up today. So I'm going to throw it back to Nathan Martin here at the Hall of Fame to ask a few more of those student questions.
Yeah, thanks again, Jake. Kara, these first couple questions from our students, not really related to maybe your career field and what you do, but I'm going to read off maybe a major or some things that they're interested in, and you could maybe tell the students like what type of job titles they should be looking up, or people they should maybe be trying to connect with on LinkedIn, or look at for potential careers in sports. This student is an information systems and supply chain management with a concentration in cybersecurity. How do you think that might work in the NFL space? I have some ideas, but I'm curious to hear what you have.
Well, I would say we are of the utmost secure, like we want the most secure universe within our four walls. And so we have a really strong IT team. That comes to mind initially. I'm sure there's other things, that you can kind of dabble in with that. But I mean, we have a whole like kind of section of our second floor dedicated to IT. And I think, there's the business side. We obviously, IT is needed on the business side, but then there's the football side. There's videos and things that are being managed that need to stay extremely private, when they're watching film and things like that. And so there's a lot of support needed for both football and the business side on IT. So that's what initially comes to mind, but yeah.
That's kind of where I was at. So I think we're on the same page. So maybe there is a path there for that student. Next one is more so on the legal side, has a criminal justice background, but curious just about player contracts, vendor contracts. How's that handled? What types of positions are there within the NFL space with that type of major?
Yeah, we have a large legal department as well. Every vendor group we work with, there's a contract in place, and same with the football side. So, yeah, that's a really easy one. That's definitely needed in the NFL, and at every franchise. So there's a future, a bright future.
This is a good question. This comes from Carter, a student at Georgia State University. We've talked a little bit about interviews and resumes and just networking versus relationships. What would be your piece of advice on how to make that good first impression? I know for students, it can be challenging sometimes. It was for me, like you feel that awkwardness when you're trying to connect. So like maybe some advice you could give on like how to try to get over that awkwardness so that you can make a good first impression.
Yeah, no, I experienced that as well. And I think just be yourself. For me, I think I'm a pretty like positive, upbeat, outgoing person. And so not tempering that too much, like because if you're not acting authentic to yourself, it shows. And so yeah, I think that's the best piece of advice I can give on that space, because everybody's different. And so whoever you are, just be yourself. And be open to, meeting new people too, I guess. But,
I think I would add to that something that I've heard too, like you've got to go do it. So like, give yourself as many opportunities as possible. Like, don't try to put all your eggs in one basket. You know that you got this one person coming to this networking fair at your university or whatever. And that's the job you want. Like, you want to try to go meet as many people as possible, because the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be, the more that you're going to be able to, remain yourself and show your true personality and your true colors.
I'll also add, it's a good one too, like be curious. And I know when we're moving fast and we have sort of something in mind that we want to get to, like stop and when whoever you're with, just be curious about them, ask them questions, and whether it's about their role or their life or their just individual self, like the curiosity shows through, and that means that you're genuinely interested in getting to know somebody, and they'll give that back to you. And then, if you meet somebody that you think can make an impact on your career and you want to stay in touch, make sure you follow up immediately. I think so many times we meet people and then we kind of move on to the next thing. And that follow-up continues that conversation. And it's really important that you follow up and do it, in the right way, whether it's, you said you're going to do something, do that thing, or if they offered, to help you with something, remind them and just say thanks again for your time and be grateful. So I would just add that.
So you mentioned the follow-up piece, and I've heard others do that. And I think it is critical and important to remember in the relationship networking space. How often, in your opinion, do you think students should maybe think about doing that? Obviously, it can vary based on the relationship that you have already formed. But, if they're just trying to kind of get their foot in the door and follow up with someone they met at a networking fair or something, what is like that appropriate amount, that they should be reaching out, I guess, do you think?
Yeah. I don't know that there's like a specific number or amount, but I think it's, if someone, let's say you meet somebody and they're like, hey, like I work here and, we have these roles and like opportunities coming up, you should check it out. A good follow-up would be sending them an email and be like, really, thank you for sharing that insight. Do you mind sending me that link? Or I found this link, here are a couple questions, like come out with specific questions and add value to the discussion. Make sure it's not just one way either. Like, someone can, when early on in your career, it's really easy for a lot of people to help you. And maybe there's not a ton of ways in which you can add value, but, volunteering for an organization that, they mention that you care about and then they care about. I think it's just kind of finding ways to stay in touch in that space. If you genuinely want to, I think that's a big thing. Like, and so I don't think there's a quantity, but like genuinely like following a relationship. I mean, how you ever build friendships or whatever else like that, just take that same approach with this space. Because it does, I mean, sports is such a fun world and we all become friends anyway. So that's kind of how I would look at it. If that helps you reframe it differently. And it's not so, there's not so much pressure on the networking side of things. So that's what I would say.
Last question I got from our students, and we've already done one with Abby, but Abby heard, again, she's from the University of Illinois. She heard that you're a part of the WISE organization. She goes, I love WISE. So she must be a part of it or is looking to become a part of that there in Illinois. And she says, what are the day-to-day interactions like for you as a woman working in the sports industry? still, male dominated at this point. What is that like for you day to day?
Nowadays, good. I would say when I started in my career with sales with MLS, there was 2 of us in a group of 9. And I think, you just felt outnumbered, you felt misrepresented many times. And I think now, like, I'm pretty vocal and I'm not too afraid to, if I feel disrespected, I'll say something or be like, hey, like, one thing that has happened to me too is I've been in a room and someone's asked me to take notes and I'd be like, well, I'm happy to do that, but next week you can take notes. But overall, I think I love how the industry's changed in this space. I don't feel like, there are a lot of jobs that are male dominated, but that's not so much the truth. In other areas, we probably are 50-50 male female at the Minnesota Vikings. So I love to see it. And now also there's a lot of support, whether it's through people and culture or groups like WISE, where you can tap into, other spaces where, it's a little bit more of a community and, you have the ability to talk to your colleagues, your peers and that may be dealing with the same thing. But it's honestly, Abby, it's been pretty good. And I'm excited to see where the industry is going with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome to hear that, at least you don't have the numbers in front of you, but it feels like the Vikings on the business side, at least are pretty much 50-50 and it's improved even during your time with the team. So that's amazing and hopefully encouraging to any of our students that are female that are looking to work in the sports industry. But again, Kara, thanks for being a part of the program on behalf of myself, on behalf of all the students. We had a ton of students logged in today watching the program. So thank you so much for being a part of Before the Snap, but I'm going to send it back to Jake to kind of wrap things up.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. And Kara, we're going to dive right into our last part here, our last few pieces, and we're going to start with our rapid fire questions. Kind of a more laid back, fun segment we do here on Before the Snap. So are you ready for your rapid fire segment?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Question 1, LinkedIn. Great way to network or just another social media app?
Great way to network.
Number 2, GPA on a resume. Leave it on, keep it off?
Leave it on until you have your first job and then take it off.
Number 3, social media accounts, public or private?
Personally, I think it's a personal choice. I go private.
Number 4, and maybe the most important, jeans at work, all day, every day, just casual Fridays, or never?
Dress for your day. So it's a little bit of both. Jeans and, some days you're suited up.
Awesome. 5, coin toss, heads or tails?
Tails.
Then finally, you score a touchdown, your go-to touchdown celebration.
I mean, I got to go with the gritty because of JJ.
I figured that was the answer. I think everybody we've had on this program who works for the Vikings answers with the gritty. So not surprised with that answer at all. Before I ask my last question here, I just want to echo Nathan's sentiments there. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. We know that the NFL, doesn't shut down on Fridays from noon to 1 when we do this program. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this program, which leads me to my last question. And we ask this to end every Before the Snap program. So many great pieces of information from all the students' questions that you were able to provide there. But if there's one thing you want everybody to take away from the day, if it's just their one thing that they can remember, what's that one piece of advice, that one nugget of information you want people to walk away with today?
I think the one thing that really resonated with me when I was early on in my career was someone told me to find my superpower. And I stand by that because I think as soon as you decide what you're best at, and if you just have that awareness, you are free to really understand where your best fit is within the industry. And I think that is the most important because it's, you want to be fulfilled and happy and you want to be in a space where you're able to thrive. So that's my advice.
Find your superpower. Awesome. What a great way to wrap up this installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Before the Snap series today, featuring Kara Kawakami from the Minnesota Vikings. Again, Kara, thank you so much for being a part of our Before the Snap series.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Everybody out there, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, comment, whatever it is on all the Pro Football Hall of Fame social media channels. You're going to see some awesome clips of this program come out here across our channels here over the next couple weeks, as well as all the other great content we have here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I encourage you to do the same with the Minnesota Vikings to see all the great things that they're doing up in Minnesota, as well as throughout the community. Next week, we're back on next Friday, October 27th. We're going to have Eric Long from the Philadelphia Eagles, who works in production and content. So I don't know if he's an influencer or not, or he's got a big YouTube following, but if you're somebody who likes that, likes to produce, likes the content side of the NFL, you're going to want to tune in to that for sure. So as we said, from myself, Nathan, our director, Jerry, all the way up to our president, Mr. Jim Porter, and all of our Hall of Famers, Kara, I want to thank you for being a part of the program, everything you do for the game of football, because that definitely impacts us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So again, Kara, thank you for being a part of the program. To all of our students, thank you for tuning in. We hope to catch you here next week on Before the Snap. Bye.